Beautiful. Once we've got our React router in place, I think I'm going to start on those components that will be displayed on every page. So we've got navbar, of course, footer, and also the sidebar. Now, when it comes to navbar, we need to understand that there's going to be two layouts, and I'll control them using CSS. So we'll have big screen layout, where I'm going to have the logo, I'm going to have the links, and also the card buttons. And then once we get to the smaller screen, this is not going to be done using the React, but essentially we'll have only the logo and then the toggle button here. So that's going to be a small screen layout. And then once I click on a button, then I can see the sidebar. And the same is going to work on the sidebar, where essentially we'll only see the sidebar once we get to the small screen. So notice, once I navigate to the big screen, using CSS, I'll just hide it because notice, of course, now I have the links and then the buttons. Hopefully that is clear, where we have small screen layout for the navbar, where there's going to be only logo and then the button. So once I click the button, I can see the sidebar. And then once I get to the big screen, I'm not going to have the button to toggle the sidebar, and also sidebar will be hidden by default. And in here, I'm going to have my links as well as the card buttons. Now, these card buttons are going to be separate component because I'll use them here in the sidebar as well. So let's set up our navbar. We're going to navigate back to our project. Of course, we're looking for navbar.js. Again, it is going to be in the components directory. I'll close all the files that I have currently open. So open editors, I'm just going to close them. And in the source, we're looking for components and navbar.js. So that's our navbar component. As you can see, we have quite a few imports. So of course we have the style. Notice here I set up my styled component, which of course we'll use in a second. Now in this case, I call this nav container just to showcase that you can call whatever you would want, but in most cases it's gonna be a wrapper. And as you can see, I'm returning a nav. Like I said, we can return whatever HTML element we would want. And as far as the logo, well, I'm just importing the image from the assets. And if I haven't covered this already during the course, if you want to render images in React, you can either do it using the URL like we have been doing from the API, where essentially we get some kind of URL that points back to the API, or if you want to display it locally, then of course you need to set up that image. So in this case, I have assets folder, and in that assets folder, I have logo SVG, and then we import. Now the gotcha about the import, that the path has to be a full path, meaning we need to point to the directory, which is going to be assets, and then we have the full name. So we're going to go with logo and then .svg, or for example, we have hero-bcg and then .jpeg. So effectively, we need to include the file extension as well. Because remember, when it comes to JavaScript files, we really don't care. We just go with the file name. But when it comes to CSS, as well as the images, we need to go the full path route, where we go with the full name of the file. So in this case, it is logo and then .svg. Then we need to give it some kind of name. So in my case, I went with logo. And then, of course, I'll have to use it in my component. We have we have icon coming from React icons. This is just going to be that little toggle button icon. We have a link from React Router down, since, of course, we'll be setting up links. Then also we have links coming from the constants, and I'm going to cover that once we get there. And then, of course, the card buttons component that we'll work on in the next video. Because first, I would want to focus on setting up our navbar. And then, of course, we have a few imports from global context that we're not going to cover at the moment, but we'll cover later once we get there. So I'll close the sidebar just so I have a bit more real estate. And in here, we're going to go with nav container. And inside of this nav container, what I would want is to set up nav center div. So nav center div. And then inside of this div, I'm going to go with nav header, where I'm going to place my image. as well as the button. So we're gonna go here with nav header, and then inside of it, I'm gonna place my image and the button. Now, just to showcase that we can wrap our images in links, essentially, I'll show you how to do that. So if I'll make this smaller, notice how I can click here and I'm navigating back to the homepage like so. So the reason why is that happening, because I can just place my image inside of the link. And in order to do that, we simply need to go with our link component that we're getting from React Router DOM. Remember, that was the component that we had to use. And I'm just going to set up some kind of path. In my case, that is the homepage. That's why I go with /. And then we go with image. And remember, for the source, now I need to use this variable name, wherever you have it for the name. So in my case, of course, that is a logo. So I go with logo as far as the alternative. I'm just going to say comfy and then sloth. And once I save, I should see my logo here. And of course, once I click, I can navigate to the homepage. But since, of course, we already are on homepage, it's kind of hard to see that. So let's go to the products. We should still see the navbar, correct? Since navbar is displayed on all the pages. And then once we click, notice how we nicely navigate back to the homepage. Beautiful. And once we've got our link, then like I said, I'm going to go with button. And then we're going to add right away type button. That's just necessary for the HTML. We're going to go with class name and nav toggle. So that's the name of the class. And by the way, if you want to see the styling, just scroll down and notice this is the CSS that I used. And this is the case where I use the nesting, because inside of this button, I will place my icon. And that icon comes as the SVG element. So I said, yeah, grab me the nav toggle. And then inside of that nav toggle, I'm looking for the SVG. Again, something I covered already before, but I'm just reiterating so we all are on the same page. Now, eventually there's going to be on click, but not for now. So we're going to go with FA bars. That's the icon I would want to place. And the moment I say, of course, there is. I have my logo. And of course, I have my button as well. And next, of course, I would want to have those links. Now, I can tell you right away that links will be hidden. If you scroll down a little bit, notice how by default I hide the links. And then only once I get to 992, then links are displayed. Something I showed at the very beginning of the video. Now, the gotcha here is, remember, technically, if I wanted to, I could do something like this, where I still want to set it up within the nav center. So don't place it inside of the nav header, but also don't place it outside of the nav center. I can go with unordered list, and we're going to go with nav links class. So that is important. And technically, yes, I can go with list item and then place all my links one by one. But remember, it was somewhat of a bad practice. Why? Well, because we also have the navbar. And let me, by the way, close this one. We also had the sidebar, correct? And in the sidebar, I'm essentially using the same links. So it would make sense if we would set those links up in one place and then just import them and, of course, render them. And if I'm telling you that, of course, I already set up those links in a separate place. So I would want you to navigate to the utils and then look for constants.js. And in here, there's multiple things that I set up. One of them is services. The other one is the URLs that we're going to use. But the very first one is the links component. And in that links component, well, essentially it's an array, but I'm just going to call this component. And in that array, each link represents the page, correct? And it is set up as an object. In here, I have the ID. Since I'll have the list, I'll have to use the key prop. Then the text that is going to be displayed, also the /. So in your case, if you want to add more pages, I would suggest just adding those links in here. Now, there might be some issues eventually if you keep on adding more and more links with CSS. Since in my case, when it comes to CSS, I really thought that there's going to be only 4. Eventually, there's also going to be a checkout, but that's a story for another day. Just keep in mind that if you want to add more links, you can definitely do it. So I have my links. I'm exporting as links. So this is named export. And of course, in the navbar, and also in the sidebar, I import those links. I import that array. Now, what you'll also notice that there is no checkout. So checkout will have to do it somewhat manually. Now, why we're doing it manually? Because checkout will be only displayed if the user has logged in. So in this case, notice the user hasn't logged in because it says login, and then I would need to log in order to change it to the logout. So once we log in, only then we can see the checkout. That's why I did not include in this array. So now let me close the sidebar. We have our links. And again, instead of setting up manually, I'm just going to iterate over my array. I'm going to say links map, and then for every item, and I'm just going to call this link. I'm not going to be particularly original. And from the link, what I would want to get, well, remember it was an object, and the properties were ID, text, and then the URL. And that is all coming from the link. And as far as the return, we're going to go with a list item. And remember, we have, of course, the list. So we need to have a key prop. I'll pass in the ID. That's going to be my unique value. And inside of this list item, we're going to go with a link. And then, of course, we'll have to prop. And that will point to the URL. So where I would want to navigate. And inside of this link, I would want to show my text. So save, and of course, now I should see my links. Now, keep in mind, we're not going to see them on the small screen. So let's navigate here. I have my hello, which of course is the arrow page, but instead I would want to go to the home page, and there it is. Once we get to the big screen, of course, we can see the links. Now, while we're still on a small screen, I cannot see the links. And by the way, I've massively zoomed in. So of course, if you go to 100%, you'll see them right away. But in my case, I'll have to make my screen size bigger. And there it is. Now I have my links. So now, of course, we can go to About page, Products page, Home page. And of course, we can also use our logo. So in here, I click on a logo and I go back to the home page. And then the last thing is going to be cart buttons, which we're going to set up in the next video. So I have my unordered list over here. And since I would want to display those card buttons in both places. And by the way, I struggled here with the naming. I went with card buttons. Technically, it's a link, and the second one is the button for the login. So I was struggling to come up with a name. So I just went with card buttons, just giving you heads up where technically maybe you might come up with a better name. But just remember, if you change the name, then you need to use it in two places. It's going to be in the navbar as well as the sidebar. So right after the unordered list, I'm going to go with my card buttons, like so, my component, which again, we're not going to be able to eventually see once we set up properly the CSS on a small screen, but it's going to be displayed on a big screen here as far as the buttons. Beautiful. Once everything is in place, as far as the basic navbar setup, I think now we can focus on the card button suckers.